The opinions expressed in the following program are provided for general information purposes only and should not be construed as advice from CJAD 800 or Bell Media. Listeners should always consult their own real estate agent with questions or concerns. The following is sponsored content.
Welcome to the Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Helen Akrivos on CJAD 800.
And a happy Sunday afternoon, everyone. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Terry Kilakos, chartered mortgage broker and president of Northeast Mortgages, as well as founder of Northeast Group of Companies. Joining me as usual in studio, I have my beautiful co-host, Helen Akrivos, chartered real estate broker and president of Northeast Realties. How you doing, Eleni?
I'm awesome.
You're having an awesome weekend?
Excellent.
Amazing, amazing. Today we're going to be talking about the government's first-time homebuyer incentive, the good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to be looking at all the different details regarding it. We're going to have a look at what it takes to actually qualify for the program, why the government actually put this in place, and how much money can you actually get out of them, and what you actually have to pay back. Because, you know, just as important as what we're getting out of something, we want to know what we're actually going to be paying back. And don't forget, if you have any questions, you can always reach us by calling 514-680-4674. That's our office number. Or you can also text in to our lovely Olympia's cell phone, which is 514-433-7790. And she's always, eager to direct your calls and make sure that you get all the answers that you're looking for. And if you haven't done so already, take a moment and go and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is newsonthego.ca, where you get to see all the fun and exciting stuff that happens behind the scenes. As well, you can watch us live on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Northeast Mortgages or Northeast Realties. And again, don't forget to subscribe to newsonthego.ca. Before we kick off the show, I do want to kind of take a quick look at what's going on in the market. It's crazy. I mean, what are you seeing, Eleni, right now?
Well, just to do a follow-up from last week's show, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, Montreal prices have gone up a little bit since last year. Mm-hmm. People are saying it's hot, hot, hot. Yes, it's hot, but let's really understand why it's hot. Because there's a low supply. And so there's a high demand in Montreal for homes, specifically in certain areas. And because there's not a lot of supply, and we're talking about 15 to 20% less listings. So if you look at July of this year, August of this year, compared to last year, there's less homes for sale. Yeah. And so what that does, simple supply and demand, it makes the prices go up.
Yeah. And we've seen this, and to risk, I mean, until the government changes this, I'm just going to keep harping on this. A lot of it has to do with the stress test that the government put in place. Guys, it's an election year, just FYI, okay? I'm not telling you where to vote, but let's not forget the government that put in the stress test, okay? You have to remember something. A lot of people that were thinking about selling their homes and moving on to a bigger house or whatnot don't qualify anymore. Right.
And a lot of people just don't know about this. So when I even just bring up the stress test, people say, well, what is that?
Clearly, they don't listen to the Real Estate Show.
No, or they don't understand it. Like they don't understand how is it going to affect me as a seller. And you just said it. That's one of the reasons that there are no listings, let's say. Right.
Or a lot less listings, right?
It's a lot less, right? Okay. You see there's less signs. As soon as something goes up, what happens? It gets sold quickly, multiple offers. Not in all areas, and depending how you're pricing your home. Some sellers are taking it too far. They're overpricing their home, so it's not selling because we keep seeing this hot, hot, hot market. It's calculated though, right? So things have gone up, prices have gone up, but it's, you can still afford, but we're going to look at the incentives, right? And the stress test and see how that's really affected.
One of the things that I actually noticed, a lot of my clients who were thinking about selling their places, they came in to do the calculations to see what they could afford with the new stress tests and, looking at all the different programs. And what they've actually realized is they're not able to sell their house at necessarily the price point that they would really want, okay, because there's a smaller amount of people that would actually qualify to buy it at a higher price point, which means that even the houses that they would want to go buy after, they would not necessarily be able to qualify for it. So instead, what they're opting to do is to refinance, take out $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of equity out of the house that they're in, take that money and invest it back into the house, renovate it, get their bathrooms up to snuff, get the kitchens.
We're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah,
and the RBQ guys are loving it.
Oh, of course,
There's
absolutely.
a long wait,
Yep.
for the RBQ people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. I think this whole stress test, because people are staying where they're where they're at, the contractors are just so busy. It's obscene. I mean, I haven't seen contractors this busy in a very long time, and it's because people are staying put and they're focusing all their attention on doing renovations as opposed to selling their house and moving on.
On the flip side, I don't know how much time we have left, but you talked about sellers. I've actually been working and seeing a lot of buyers because they're limited with the stress test. They're buying properties now that need renovation. So instead of buying the clé en main, turnkey, everything's great, and which everybody wants, and those homes, by the way, do fly off the shelves. They're, an example, Tina, that we both work with, she bought a house in Beaconsfield. That she's going to be hiring, renovators and redoing the property because in her price point, the houses need renovations. So I think buyers have to be more aware that you should be willing to buy a house that needs renovation. Yeah. And not just go for the turnkey, because the turnkey, they are selling at top dollar.
Do you find, though, that people are open to doing that, or do you...
Not really. It depends. A lot of people are, especially depends on, it stresses them out to do the renos. The renos. But again, you're limited because if you're buying a house that's already renovated, you're buying it at top dollar, plus you're in the multiple offer situation. Sure. Which we were just discussing off air. Could go for anywhere between 40 and 80,000 over asking, just so that people understand. A lot of buyers don't, and then that stresses buyers out. So we have a lot of buyers that have been looking for a year. Yeah. And they haven't been able to get into a house.
If you look at the condo market, are we seeing the same thing? Are we seeing...
it's a bit different in the condo market. So there's still more condos on the market. There's not, a low supply unless you're looking at specific type of condos. So condo market, I mean, it's easier to get in to a condo as a buyer. Right. But depending on, where your family's from, some families, like I know some young couples, my family's telling me not to buy a condo. There's too many fees. It's too uncertain. But if it's the only property that you can afford, right? And we know that prices are going up in Montreal for condos in first time in, 10 years. It's not a bad thing.
Okay, so that's exactly what I wanted to ask. So right now we're seeing condo prices actually going up.
Which is unheard of. Yeah. So it's the first, in the last 2 years, we've had a lot of, net migration from other parts of Canada, foreign workers. So the condo prices have gone up in the last 2 years. So if that's anything to
so it's an interesting trend here.
Yeah, to foresee in the next, even people from Toronto and Vancouver are buying condos here. So, but the supply is still there. So we have a supply of condos.
Okay, so hold on. So you just said something interesting. So there's people from Vancouver, Toronto. And I'm assuming, is this foreign investors that are coming in to buy condos in Montreal, or?
So we have a small percentage that are buying them and renting them. Okay, even though people think that it's a high percentage, it's actually a low percentage. We have more people from Vancouver and Toronto because our prices are more interesting.
Okay, interesting. Okay, coming up, we're going to be looking at some of the details surrounding the new incentive program that the government is coming in, and we're going to also be looking at the RRSP rules, how they've changed a little bit. For now, we're just going to take a little bit of a detour to the CJAD Traffic Center.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Helen Akrivos on CJAD 800.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show, and today we're talking about the federal government's first-time homebuyers incentive program, which was launched on September 2nd, actually, not too long ago. But this was actually announced a while back. It was a few months ago, where the government basically came in response to the stress test that came out a couple of years ago, people were kind of hooing and hawing, and I was one of them, truth be told, where, we found that there wasn't a lot of, didn't make a lot of sense. So the government decided to change some things a little bit. One of the things that they changed, not getting into the first-time homebuyers incentive program yet was actually the home buyers plan. Now, the home buyers plan is specifically related to RSPs, right? So you, as a first-time home buyer, you're able to access, it used to be up to $25,000 out of your RSP to be used towards the purchase of your first home. Since the new kind of announcements were made a few months ago, that has been increased from $25,000 to $35,000, and there's still a lot of people that don't know that. The other thing that they changed is whether or not how you're considered, if you will, a first-time home buyer. So a couple that were married and, I don't know, the husband had already bought it with a first-time home buyers not incentive program, the home buyers plan. What ends up happening now is when the divorce occurs, then the spouse can be deemed a first-time home buyer, which I think is excellent. Okay, so that helps tremendously the situation, if you will.
Given that Quebec has the highest rate of divorce across Canada.
Absolutely, 100%. Most people just opt not to get married altogether.
Yeah, exactly.
In Quebec. We're not going to get into that, but that's a whole, that's probably a whole other show. But what we are looking at now is the actual incentive program, which is the first-time home buyers incentive program that the government put in. It's interesting. Okay, on the surface, I gotta give them kudos for being a little bit, creative on it. Although we have seen the states do the same thing. So after 2008, when the crisis happened in the United States, to stimulate the real estate market, what the federal government did in the states is they put a program like this in place where first-time home buyers were getting an incentive. There is a danger there, people, okay? And this is, and I'm trying to stay very positive when I'm talking about this program because it is a good thing for some. But there is a danger there because what the government is actually doing is they're putting all of the weight of the real estate market, or a huge chunk of the weight of the real estate market, on first-time home buyers.
Is that because usually the first-time home buyers drive the market in general?
Sure. Yeah, we could say that. Okay. But there is a lot of weight that's going on, and I don't necessarily think that it's the responsible thing to do. Had I been in, government, I would probably say let's fiddle with the stress test as opposed to putting in something like this.
So just talking about the stress test, did they make any changes to the amortization? Because that could have been something.
Yeah.
I'm reading sort of articles from different mortgage brokers and real estate professionals saying, why not, for example, just for first-time buyers, if that's the people that you want to help, change the amortization, allow them to do 30 or 35 years.
Yeah.
That would simply lower their mortgage payment. Right?
There's again, I'm really trying to stay, keep this on a positive spin. But the reality is that you end up having a stacking of policy changes, right? And we've seen them occur from 2008. So the first changes occurred in October of 2008, where the government came in, they reduced amortizations from 40 to 35 years. They, you used to be able to buy properties at 100% financed when it was owner occupied. They reduced that to 95. Then we saw them change the amortization periods again from 35 down to 30, then from 30 down to 25 for insured mortgages. So we've seen like the government just stack rules upon rules. And now they're putting this in place, which again is putting a lot of weight on first-time home buyers. And it's kind of like encapsulated as this wonderful thing, but it's got some hair to it. And as long as you're okay with that hair that it's got, well, it'll be good.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, let's talk about the purpose of it. So you're kind of giving a nice background of it, but the purpose of it, if you go on their website, is to help first-time home buyers. It's clearly stated that this is what it's for, right? So in their mind, it should be stimulating the sales. And they do not mention anything about the stress test, unfortunately, right? They just talk about we're putting these incentives in place. So we heard about these incentives in March of this year.
Yeah.
Okay. I've even a few of my clients said, I'm going to wait until the fall to put my house up for sale because this incentive is going to help more buyers buy my house, and maybe they'll be able to afford and pay more for my house. So I'm it remains to be seen if they can actually afford more, or they're just basically shaving off a couple of $100 off their mortgage per month, right? So on your end, I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's actually going to help? What's the basis of it? Do you think it's going to help buyers qualify?
No, I mean, I'll give you, let's look at the basics of the program. Okay. So, the basics are this: if you're buying an existing property, so let's say, you're a first time home buyer, you want to buy a condo or a single family home, and you have 5% to put down, what the government is going to do is they're going to kick in an additional 5%. Okay. And
if you want,
right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be realistic here. I mean, some people will want it, some people won't. Okay, but it's only if you want. So the government will kick in another 5%. Now, if you're buying a new construction, so if you're buying an existing condo, a new construction condo, or if you're buying a new construction home, then what they will do is they will kick in 10%. Okay, so let's just look at that one specific rule. Who does that really help? It helps, again, the construction industry. Right? So there's more incentive to buy a new construction than there is to buy an existing home. Well, why? GST, PST, all right? So you have taxes, you have all these things that the government is going to get money from
with more sales of new construction.
Exactly, okay? Plus there's more taxes that they're going to be generating, so on and so forth, okay? So again, it's a good thing, but at the same time, you have to kind of read between the lines. Why? Remember, and this is, if for everyone that listens to the show, I always tell you, remember, when someone comes up with something, you always have to say, what's in it for them? And there always has to be a give and take. I mean, obviously, when someone is giving you something, there should be something that you're giving back. And I get it, okay? And, the government is doing this to help you, but at the same time, they're taking something back. And you have to be aware of what they're taking back and how they're structuring the take back. And as long as you're okay with that, well, then that's fine. So if we actually go into the program, okay, first and foremost, I mean, let's look at what defines a first-time home buyer. Right. So what defines a first-time home buyer would be someone that has not owned a property in 4 years. OK, so and that's the same thing as the home buyer's plan with the RSPs. If you haven't owned, or your spouse hasn't owned, or common law partner hasn't owned a property in the last 4 to 5 years, you are deemed a first-time home buyer.
Sorry, so just to be clear, you said the common law. So even if your name is not on the house,
that's right,
but your common law partner or spouse's name is on a house for the past 4 years, then you're not a first time. Like, your name or your spouse's cannot be on a house for the last 4 years.
Exactly.
Except for the divorce cases. So people who are divorced, they can qualify as first-time buyers, home buyers, which is something new.
Exactly. Coming up, we're going to be continuing our discussion on the First-Time Home Buyers Incentive Program. You're listening to The Real Estate Show on CJAD.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Helen Akrivos on CJAD 800.
Thanks for joining us on The Real Estate Show. Today, we're talking about the federal government's First-Time Home Buyers Incentive. Remember, you can always reach us at the office by calling 514-680-4674 or by visiting us at northeastmortgages.com or .ca. And remember, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is newsonthego.ca, where you get to see all this fun and exciting stuff that happens behind the scenes during the real estate show, during the breaks. And for those of you that listen to the show, you know that I always tend to break something in the studio. So
you're fine. But I'm so excited about our topic today because I think a lot of people just haven't heard about this and just don't know about it. So we're talking about the First Home Buyers Incentive. It's going to actually officially start on September 2nd, but we've been hearing about it all year.
That's right.
So we're going through the details with you. We will be sharing our opinions, of course, about the pros and cons, trying to stay neutral. So before the break, we talked about first-time home buyers. What is the definition of a first-time buyer? Now, there's a lot of rules, right? How do you qualify? How do you pay back? So what are the rules for qualifying in terms of the maximum income that they have to have, a maximum mortgage they can borrow?
Yeah. So let's look at maximum income allowed. So the maximum income allowed is $120,000 annually household income, or if it's an individual income. Okay, so that's first thing. Secondly, mortgage plus the incentive, okay, cannot exceed 4 times your income. So if you're at the upper limit, so let's say 120,000 times 4, that's 480.
Yeah, you're almost just under 500,000. Yeah.
My elementary school math teacher would be very proud. Again, it is for owner-occupied homes. It is for first-time home buyers. Okay, there is no interest on the incentive. Okay, so I don't want to call it a loan. It is an incentive. Okay, that the government is giving you.
It's a shared equity, which we're going to get into explaining to people.
Sure. So on the incentive, it's not interest bearing, which is a good thing and a bad thing. You have 25 years to pay it back. And you have to pay it back based on your home's fair market value. So now let's go into the shared equity portion, right? Which you kind of touched on a little bit.
This is the part that I think I don't like as much.
Sure.
But just to go back, to the 4 times the income, which is about 480,000. I think a lot of people are going to say, what can I get for that? That's sort of a side note, right? Like, what can we actually buy for that? Is there actually a house that we can live in that we like?
Well, there's condos.
There's condos.
Homes. Think about, again, Eleni, think about this is first-time home buyers, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of first-time home buyers, you're looking at people that are in their late 20s, maybe early 30s, who are buying that first, home, condo, which not necessarily going to be a, $700,000, $800,000 home here. Yeah. Right? So
it's just to tell you that the positive is that they're in Montreal. I'm not going to speak for the other provinces because they're upset about this.
Sure.
In our market, there are homes you can definitely buy, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Toronto, Vancouver, ain't going to happen.
Exactly. So for us, it actually fits.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. For us, it's great. For the rest of the country, people are kind of like going, what? The HE double hockey stick.
All right, so there's no interest, but there's a shared equity on the part of CMHC and the government, and they have to pay it back according to market value.
Okay, so now here's the way, and this is the part where I myself don't really like, but let's say you get 5%. Okay, so let's say that 5% represents $10,000. Okay,
well, let's do a. So you buy a house at 400.
No, forget about that. Let's say the government gives you $10,000. Okay, let's keep the math simple here.
Okay,
the government gives you back $10,000, and that represents a 5%. Okay, down payment for you. So you're happy. You put your your $10,000. You borrow another, or you take the incentive for another $10,000. So you end up having $20,000 down payment. Let's look at the good part about it. The good part about it is obviously that's going to reduce your monthly mortgage payment. Okay, so that's the first thing. How much is it going to reduce it by? It's not a lot, but it does reduce it a tiny bit.
It's about, from what I saw, the calculations about $120, $140 per month.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So you end up saving that. Okay, great. Okay, so that'll help you qualify a little bit. Okay, so that'll give you a little bit of a kind of boost in your qualification. Mm-hmm. So that's a good thing. The problem is that when you sell this property, depending on how much the value has gone up by, you have to include that in the actual amount that you're going to pay back. So if the property has gone up by 10%, well, you're going to have to pay back $11,000. If it's gone up 20%, you're going to have to pay back $12,000, so on and so forth. Okay. If the value of the property has actually gone down, well, you're going to reduce the amount of money that you're paying them. But the likelihood in the next 25 years of a property going down is slim to none, which brings us to the next point, which you have 25 years to pay this back, or when you sell, whichever one comes first. So if you sell in 5 years, you have to pay it back in 5 years. Yeah. If you don't sell it and you keep it, well, then in 25 years, you're going to have to pay this money back to them. And you have to look at what the fair market value is. Now let's talk about what determines the fair market value. And this is something that CMHC and the government really skated around. And they said, well, what determines fair market value? Is there going to be an appraisal that needs to be done on the property? And they said, maybe, which means to me, yes. And it's at whose expense? It's obviously the client, the borrower. Okay, they're the ones that have to flip that bill.
So when you say fair market value, they're not going to consider the price of the home that's sold. So let's say I'm selling the house in...
Oh, yeah. If you sell it, of course, 100%. But I'm talking about if the 25 years comes up.
Or if it comes up, they're going to appraise the property.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or, I don't know, 4 years from now, you decide that you're tired of having this incentive program, or you need to refinance your property, you need to do something like that. This money has to be given back at that point.
Yeah, which nothing is mentioned, by the way, about refinancing. And that's where I get a little bit sort of, because we see people's lives, right, all the time. So I see people saying, I'm going to stay in this house for 10 years.
Yeah.
And on average, people do sell and move now every 5 to 7 years. Or they get into financial difficulty, something happens, they have to refinance. There's nothing mentioned about what if I have to refinance? Are you even allowed to refinance? It's not clear.
Well, you got to remember, okay, so what are the different modalities of ownership? Okay, now I'm going to get into a little bit of legalese. When you own a property, you have usus, fructus, abusus. Okay, so these are the three modalities of ownership, which means that you're able to use the property, you're able to bear fruits off the property, and you're able to abuse it. In other words, sell it, refinance it, do whatever you want with it. So you still have ownership of the property. So you are able to refinance. The challenge comes in, and this is yet again, I'm trying to really stay positive on this because I think that there's a lot of people that this program is going to help, but you do have to remember one thing. If the value of your property has gone and you want to refinance, this incentive program is being tacked on as a second mortgage onto that property. Right. So let's say you have, a mortgage with Bank ABC, then this CMHC incentive program is being tacked on as a second rank mortgage. Right. Which means there's a registration cost. There's all kinds of things that are responsible. Now, if you refinance, that mortgage that you have is getting eliminated and there's a new one being put on. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. We're going to take a small detour to the CJAD Traffic Center.
You're listening to The Real Estate Show with your real estate and mortgaging team, Terry Kilakos and Helen Akrivos on CJAD 800.
Thanks for joining us. You're listening to The Real Estate Show. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, newsonthego.ca. Today we're talking about the first-time homebuyers incentive program and the pros and the cons of it. So just to continue on what we were talking about, I was saying that when you're registering this incentive program on the property, it's being registered as a second mortgage, which means that if you need to refinance that property, well, what you're effectively doing is that first mortgage that was registered is being removed. Now, the second mortgage of CMHC is being dropped into first place. And now anything else that you would get would be put into second place behind CMHC, because that's the way that it works. It's a scheme of collocation, it's called. And as things get registered and one gets removed, like they stack up. There is no bank that wants to be second fiddle. Okay, so no bank that you go to is going to want to be second place behind CMHC. But what I'm hallucinating is going to happen in 3 years from now or 4 years for when people are looking to refinance, they're going to have to pay back that CMHC incentive program with a refinance, which means that they're going to be reducing the amount of money that they're going to be getting from a refinance drastically, right? And nobody is talking about this,
so basically,
which is upsetting me.
Yeah, so I think
I get upset very easily.
Yeah, the refinance. Yeah, so basically what Terry's saying is if you're thinking of ever refinancing, and people don't, that's the problem. What we see is nobody buys a house and says, oh, I'm going to refinance it. Unless you're an investor type and you want to, you're looking at planning on doing that. Most people do not plan on refinancing. But getting back to the positive.
Yeah.
Does this extra 5% and 10% on new construction, okay? What I want to know is, does it really help to qualify? So you see people coming in with a certain income. Is that 5% extra that the government is giving on the file actually going to help qualify for something higher, or
No.
get the mortgage or not?
No.
Is it going to be
No.
the determination between yes, you get the mortgage, or no?
No, and I'll tell you why. Maybe on the 10% side, so when you're
Okay.
buying a new construction, it'll make a difference. But
Okay.
when you're buying an existing property, okay, you do understand 5% does not represent a huge number. And if your ratios, right? So we've, for everyone that's listened to the show, you know what GDS and TDS is, right? So when your indebtment ratios are so close that
Yeah.
$100 and some odd dollars, or even a couple of $100 is going to make the difference between your file working or not, maybe you should actually reconsider the price point that you're paying for that house. The government allows us to go to 44% TDS and 39% GDS.
Which basically means not more than 44% of your income
Of your gross
income has to go to housing
and debts.
payment
Housing and debts. Okay. The GDS size says no more than 39% of your gross annual income can go to housing expenses. Okay. There is no file, or very rarely will I ever submit a file with a GDS of like 38.999%, okay, or 39. Okay. So this incentive is not going to, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. At least it's not going to make a huge difference for our client base, okay? But even for the majority of people that are buying, it's not going to make a difference.
Okay, so is it maybe for somebody, like I'm really trying to look at the positive here. Is it for somebody who wants that extra $120 to $140 a month in their pocket?
Sure, yes,
because they
100%.
feel like they can have that cash can go towards other things.
So now we're talking.
They're not worried about the the paying it back, and they know they're going to stay there. So I think if we look at specific situations, it could work.
So let's be strategic, okay? And now this is where we have to go against human nature, okay? You have to say, I'm going to be saving $150 a month, let's say, because of this incentive program. Now, what you do with that $150 of savings, and this is one of the things that I always tell my clients, even when someone is coming into a refinance, I've always said, the common kind of perception is you should never refinance a car, for example, because you're going to refinance your car into a mortgage. Your car is going to be dead in like 4 years, and you're going to still be paying for the next like 25 years. Okay, so you shouldn't be refinancing a car unless what you do with that savings makes a difference. Okay, so let me explain. Let's say you have that car payment, or let's say the incentive program, it's $150 a month. You take that $150 and you use it for something. Dump it into your RSPs. I don't know. Come up with something clever that will generate a return for you. Yeah. Okay. Now, if you're able to do that, now all of a sudden the incentive program starts to make sense because you're using that $150 to your advantage. Unfortunately, human nature, not our listeners, because our listeners are, very astute, okay, and they're, very responsible, but there is people out there who are going to take that $150 and just spend it.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Exactly. And not to bring back the stress test, okay? Because I don't personally think, I'm just going to throw my opinion out there, that this is going to quote unquote stimulate the real estate market, because I think that's one of their goals. Because as you just pointed out, it's not going to help more people qualify.
No, I think it's going to stimulate the new construction market, but that's a whole.
I think already I know that first-time home buyers like new construction, and so that's just going to give them an extra boost to buy new construction. Sure. So that for sure. For resale, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. That being said, again, you still have to qualify for the stress test. So even though you're getting this extra 5%, you still have to qualify at 2% higher than whether it's the posted rate or the negotiated rate, which nobody is really talking about.
That's right? Exactly. 100%. 100%. I do want to talk about something else, and I want to talk about the sources of down payment, because this is something that is very important, and we're quickly running out of real estate here. Let's look at what it actually, where the sources of down payment can come from. So as a first-time home buyer, obviously you have access to the home buyer's plan. Perfect. You still have access to the home buyer's plan with this program. You can use saved funds. You can use money from a TFSA. You can use money from a gift. So if your, mom and dad want to give you money, or if your grandparents want to give you money, no problem. You're able to do that, provided that it's not a loan. It has to be money that you are receiving. What's different with this, the down payment that you're putting cannot be from borrowed funds. Now, for those of you who listen to the show, you know that your down payment can come from borrowed funds. So we can take a line of credit and
which you don't always suggest, but it could be done.
No, we don't always suggest it, but it is something that you can do. Okay, so we can do that. With this program, we can't. Okay, so we are not allowed to use the multi-source program. Okay, so the multi-source program is when you're borrowing funds to buy a property. Yep. Okay, it won't qualify, and you have to do an attestation. Okay, so in other words, you have to sign a declaration at the notary stating that you are, in fact, a first-time home buyer. Okay, so that's it. So remember, I mean, the program started September 2nd, so it's fairly new. Okay, but we're going to see how this is going to kind of evolve.
Yeah. I do like, by the way, about the first time, the fact that the first time home buyers, they've changed the definition and people who are separating can use it.
Yeah.
So that's positive.
Eleni, we've run out of real estate.
Okay, that's it.
I know it's crazy how these shows fly by. I have a few clients that tell me, your shows need to be like 2 hours long.
I know, I've heard that too.
Again, if you guys want to get a hold of us, you can reach us at the office, 514-680-4674. As well, you can visit us online at northeastmortgages.ca or .com. Eleni, how do people get a hold of you?
We're on Facebook, northeastrealties.ca. You can reach us at our office line, 514-680-4674.
Guys, have a blessed week. Love you all.
The opinions expressed in the preceding program were provided for general information purposes only and should not be construed as advice from CJAD 800 or Bell Media. Listeners should always consult their own real estate agent with questions or concerns. The preceding was sponsored content.